and this is why I'm such a huge proponent of running on feel. And this time of year is so common to see athletes in their bodies, there's a tug of war between from the chin up and then the chin down, which is their mind, what they want to do, what they think they should be able to do, what their expectations are, versus what their body is saying, which is, I need to take care of me.
Good morning, Coach.
Man, happy Thursday. It's May 28th, 2020. Welcome aboard Crushing Iron Podcast 377.
377.
377. I gotta say, everyone should give a big thumbs up and kudos to Mike for getting up an hour earlier today to accommodate my travel schedule, as he is up and at 'em at 8 a.m. Central, which is, well, I would say early, but it seems the last couple of weeks you've been kind of naturally easing into an earlier wake up. Is that true or false?
I guess naturally,
maybe hit or miss.
Every once in a while, I'm naturally easing into it.
Might be a good idea to start phasing into what we consider here East Coast time zone.
I know that's the thing, right? That and honestly, I've been thinking about camp too.
Oh, I know.
Early morning camp hours. Every once in a while, I just get up at 3:30 just for the heck of it to see.
Get going.
Yeah, it's like race day training, right?
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I would say in general, I am breaking a lifelong pattern a little bit, slowly but surely. It's not the easiest thing.
You're chipping away. You're just chipping away. You can't do it overnight, nor should you. That's always interesting. We've had this conversation before. We won't dive into it too much today, but
let's dive in.
we got other topics you said were pertinent to discuss today. It is. We'll try to change their habits and stuff like that, and their behaviors like overnight, and then they get frustrated because they can't stick with it, when it's always much easier to just kind of chip away. So if you're trying to, readjust and you want to eventually start waking up at 6 a.m., but you usually wake up at 7:30 or 8, don't jump to like 5:30. Jump to like, 7:15, and then 7, and then 6:45, and then slowly and surely get there. Don't try to just pull the Band-Aid off and then expect things to go to happen, because usually you just crash, and you do it for a few days, and then it takes us. Camps are hard on us anyway, because we're out in the sun. We have athletes. We have a lot on our mind, a lot of responsibilities, but getting up and being on and waking up at 5:15 and 5:30 and then going, it usually takes us like a week to recover from camp. It's just hard. But yeah, so if you're out there and you're trying to change your wake up habits or your sleeping patterns, just try to chip away. You don't have to do it overnight. Don't be too hard on yourself. And if it's your first time listening, welcome. Thank you. It is, like we said, Crushing Iron Podcast. This is our 377th episode. We come to you twice a week. Most oftentimes on Mondays and Thursdays, but if somehow we miss those and we delay things, we at least come to you always twice a week, and have so for about 3 years. We cover triathlon and we cover life. We cover some of the more in-depth training topics that are directly related to probably what you're thinking when you're trying to figure out your own training plan, or when you're looking for a coach, or trying to just really navigate the very chaotic and overwhelming triathlon world, which is it's kind of hard to consume everything without a filter. And so we do our best to kind of dive into those areas. We occasionally will have on race directors. We will do a lot of race recaps in terms of races we've been to, races we've participated in, and then also we
I missed those, by the way.
Oh yeah, we do miss those. It's I'm excited to do some more. Hopefully, one of our more popular race preview was Muncie 70.3. Hopefully that'll become relevant again here in about the next month, as they hopefully have that event. But we do all those things, and then Mike and I, as both coaches and athletes, we just have. We hop on the podcast. We have an open, honest discussion about things we're going through, things our athletes are going through, and oftentimes we'll just check the pulse of our community, go over those topics. But for the most part, we just try to deliver an honest, open conversation. No agenda, no ads, no sponsors, just our thoughts and what we're going through. And then if you can take something positive from that and apply it to your daily training and regular life, and take something positive away that helps, then we'll have done our job for today.
Yeah, it's just kind of a coffee talk, right? Just like hanging out with us at the coffee shop.
That's my favorite compliment, man. That's my favorite compliment that we get. It's not like, well, I mean, we appreciate the other ones that are more triathlon related, but it's like I feel like I'm sitting in the coffee shop or I'm listening to two friends having a conversation, which I mean you are, let's be honest. But in terms of making you making you feel like we're not trying to shove a product down your throat or shove an agenda down your throat. Hey, I'm sure we don't always deliver things eloquently and softly, especially myself, I'm sure, but we do come from a place of trying to be genuine and trying to get you the best information that we can from, for the most part, from our own previous mistakes. And if we can help you not have those same mistakes that we've had in our both of our, pretty long triathlon hobbyist careers, then that's a bonus. And I know specifically because I just learned this lesson about, I don't know, 26 minutes ago. Some of the biggest lessons we've ever learned have been in the heat.
Mm. Oh,
So
you
it's
just
like that
learned it
second.
again?
Yeah, I too. I just, I walked back inside. I had, and Allie was like, "So, how's your run?" I'm like, "Yeah, fine. What is what is what is whatever is good." I walked back in and I said, "That was a disaster." It was. It was. I mean, that's disaster is being totally dramatic. But yesterday, on our we do like weekly athlete kind of check-in meeting on Zoom, and I go over topics, do Q&As, sometimes do some more in-depth stuff. But I talked about the heat yesterday because it is, yeah, is it super hot right now in every part of the country? No. I mean, there's still many parts of the country that are, still having fairly pleasant temps. But at least this last weekend, most people and a lot of our athletes that I work with, at least on, some of the coastal cities and states, and especially in the Midwest and the South, were like, they just said it's here, like it's arrived. And it has, like the last 2 weeks, not just the heat has crept up, but the humidity and the dew point have just been insufferable. And the I think the frustrating part, and this because this totally happened to me this morning, was you look outside and I'm like, it's overcast. It just rained. This is gonna feel perfect. Like you look outside this time of year and you're like, man, it's a cool morning. The sun's not out. It's not beating on my face. I can probably get in a good run. And then I pull up I pull up Wonderground, which is my trusted weather app.
You've been strong on that for a long
I'm
time.
always strong. I do not waver on the Wonderground. And we maybe get a sponsor from them. And I pulled it up as I was having my little pre-workout electrolyte drink and some Fig Newtons, and I saw 100% humidity and 70 dew point, and I thought to myself, this is going to suck. And it so did. I mean, it wasn't in it because it wasn't I think the interesting part, and I went into this in depth yesterday in our Zoom call, and I will to an extent today in our podcast, but that is why this time of year is so difficult for so many people to wrap their brain around. And it is well, I don't want to say impossible because that's not the right word to use. But this time of year, so many athletes find themselves getting into tremendous amounts of trouble and digging themselves massive holes by doing two things. One, they probably took things a little bit lax through January, February, March, April, and now racing season is here. Because no matter when you listen to this podcast, a lot of people don't listen to us live. Races are coming, races are happening around this time of year. Things are getting busier, and so people kind of get, during what they consider the off season, they just don't do as much. They keep their volume super low. They're pretty flexible, which you should be, but you should still be trying to get better. And so now this time of year also usually coincides with people trying to feel like, okay, well, I can get outside more. I don't have to listen to my trainer. Now it's time to get into real good shape. And they go out to run to see what kind of fitness they're in and kind of prove themselves. And they think, oh my God, I'm going to die. I can't breathe. And now they're trying to battle getting in shape. Really, they're trying to do two things at once, which is really difficult. They're trying to, A, get in really good shape or better shape, and B, acclimate that same level of fitness to the heat, which is very hard to do simultaneously. The other end of the spectrum, that you have athletes who are in fairly decent shape, but what they love to do is they love to chase paces. They love to chase miles per hour, or even, like a very specific watt, like 240 on an interval, and not have a range. and they get in this time of year and they go outside for a ride, or they go out for their long run with, some easier intervals, or even just a regular easy run, and they look at their watch and they think, I've got to be running 8:30, because that's just my pace. I'm just an 8:30 person. And they walk out the door and it's 100% humidity and 70 dew point, and they can barely breathe. Like it's super uncomfortable, because even up to, and I'll go through some studies today, and some other like more deeper info on why it's so hard to do that, or why it has such extreme effects on our body, and why it's different for everyone. But it's super, even like for a 70 dew point, it's incredibly uncomfortable just to do something easy. And what happens is athletes chase these paces that they've become accustomed to over the last few weeks or months, when temps were perfect, and winter, fall, and even early spring, and they think, oh, I've got to keep that, and if I don't, I'm losing my fitness. And they'll get back from these runs and they'll be absolutely shelled, and it affects the whole maybe not the whole rest of the week for some athletes, but a lot of athletes, it at least negatively affects the next few days, and then they continue to do it over and over again, because they feel like they're losing their fitness because the pace isn't the same. And those are two very, very common examples of how people can really dig themselves into a hole, overtraining, overstressing their body. And for a lot of athletes, getting so mentally and emotionally discouraged because they're not seeing the same. Because that's like, even for me, this was something that I've had to kind of like swallow the last few weeks, as I was getting into like really, really good run shape, and getting fairly familiar, fairly accustomed to seeing certain paces for certain routes that I do. And now you just got to kind of swallow your pride and think, all right, I do know that I'm not getting slower, because that's not how fitness works. I'm not getting slower in terms, well, to rephrase it in a way that we kind of were trying to rephrase it in one of our previous podcasts about how you should look at fitness. My fitness isn't decreasing. My fitness, however, is being more commonly and frequently expressed by spitting out slower numbers that I look at, because of the conditions that I'm running in. The humidity is higher, the dew point's higher, the heat is higher. Those all negatively impact your performance. And if you think, oh, well, it shouldn't affect that much, I should be able to see the same paces, then the same argument can be made that you should see the exact same pace for the same efforts, whether you're going uphill or downhill, and the effort should be the same. It's that conditions matter. And so this is a very hard and tricky time of year.
That's really interesting, dude. That whole part about trying to get in shape and acclimating at once, and it reminded me, like, it's almost like a new diet, really. Like we were
Yes.
talking about at the beginning of the discussion, because it's sort of like that first day, it gets hot and you're like, but or if you're in pretty decent shape and it's pretty
Mm-hmm.
hot out, you're kind of like stoked. Yeah, let's strip off some layers and let's go after it. And it might feel great that first day. It's kind of like, you eat a bunch of vegetables. It's time to change. I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go. It feels good, but it's that next few days, or the 2 or 3 days later,
Right.
and you're trying to keep it up, and it's just sucking the gas out of you all over the place. I mean, new diets can do that by cleansing all the crap you've been putting in and using more energy. And the same with this. Th- you you're the wonder ground guy. What's it
Yeah.
like? What
Now
what
maybe.
about what is dew point exactly? I mean, do you have a science or like a kind of an explanation on that? Because I don't quite always understand that. I just
So
know that if
I
it's bad,
am
it's
sure
bad.
we have some kind of meteorologist who listens to our podcast. Out of all 30 of you, there's got to be somebody that's a meteorologist. So if I butcher this, then I'm sorry. But what I believe is that dew point is the temperature in which moisture starts to collect on surfaces, and that's why. But it's also about moisture in the air, which is humidity. Like I think that's one of the struggles that people have. It's such a hard thing, wrapping their brain around, in terms of like dew point and humidity, and why they have such tremendous effects on it's just how you breathe, because the air becomes so dense and so hard to intake oxygen, that not only, and this is something that I was kind of realizing and kind of actually like working through in my brain as I was running today, was that Here we go. Let me read from the interwebs real quick about what dew point is. The dew point, so in case I don't want to butcher it. The dew point is the temperature to which air must be cooled and become saturated with water vapor. Okay, so I wasn't too far off. Um,
Oh, you nailed it, dude.
and then the measurement of the dew point is related to the humidity. A higher dew point means there is more moisture in the air. Okay, and I think that's the biggest part because the dew point is also combined with a high humidity. Like this morning, it was a 70 dew point with 100% humidity. So if you think about it, if you're, like when you're running normal and you're running in the fall and the winter months, like the air is very cool, humidity is low, dew point is basically non-existent. The air you're breathing in is perfect, right? So think of it this way, to get a visual, it's like swimming in, the crystal clear, untouched waters and lakes of like Idaho, where you could probably drink out of it, and it's super clear and pristine and clean and fresh. Now compare that to dew point and humidity, and that's like jumping in the Ohio River and swimming in Ironman Louisville. That's the difference in swimming in, and running in dew or cycling, because you're still doing it outside, in dew point and humidity, because there's so much moisture in the air, you cannot consume as much oxygen. So as I was doing my workout this morning, that was just it was just brutal. Not because the workout was over, but just because the conditions were so unfavorable that I ended up doing what I probably should have done before I started, which was just pull the plug on any kind of interval and just run the duration. Because with dew points in 70 and above, the stats basically, or the science basically says you should basically not even waste your time doing interval work because it's so oppressive, it's so uncomfortable, you shouldn't do it. But so as I was running, I was going through my time on the podcast today, and I thought, yes, is it really, really hard to breathe right now because I can't get in as much oxygen? Is my heart rate going up? Are my lungs feeling like they're working super hard? Yes, because they're trying to get more oxygen through the same kind of breathing patterns you normally take. And that's where your heart rate spikes. But then you think about even further as like the end of my run started to happen, and I was pushing a little bit, and my legs starting to kind of like harden, which I think we've all experienced with heat stress, is in running in higher humidity or higher dew point, is because like you're obviously, when you work out, what do your muscles need? Oxygen. So
Hmm.
you're depriving your whole body. And when you try to run harder, which is what happens a lot of times, people tend to, do push harder because they want to see those paces. They don't want to have that mental or physical letdown, and it can really, really just totally crush you for the entire duration of your run. And then the next few days is what happens. And the other part about humidity is that the cooling sensation that we normally get from sweating is basically taken off the table when the humidity and the dew point are so high. So, your body has its natural, defense mechanism of, and self-preservation of sweating to cool your body. But when the humidity is super high, that no longer works to really any much of a degree in your favor. And so you're thinking, okay, well, I can't breathe. It's harder to cool myself. So you think about all those things combined, and oh my God, no wonder you're going so much slower. And then I'll go in and here in a minute about how your brain perceives effort and why we kind of have this difficult tug of war this time of year with what we want to do, what we've been used to feeling and seeing fitness wise, to what our body is telling us, which is, I think and this is why I'm such a huge proponent of running on feel, and getting to understand your body, because your body will do things and will show you signs of, I need to take care of myself. Your whatever your mind wants me to do today, or whatever you're wanting me to chase, or watts or miles per hour you're wanting me to hit, I'm always going to do what I need to do to be able to survive. And this time of year is so common to see athletes in their bodies. There's a tug of war between from the chin up and then the chin down, which is their mind, what they want to do, what they think they should be able to do, what their expectations are, versus what their body is saying, which is, I need to take care of me. And those are sometimes the two expectations, or the two agendas that each one of them have, are polar opposite. And that's where you see people just absolutely get crushed.
Yeah, it's amazing to me when we look at some of these charts that say, hey, at this temperature, your pace might actually be a minute and a half slower.
Right?
I mean, that just blows my mind, right? Like they're
Isn't it?
talking about like in a 10K or something like that, you might be running if you're normally running 8:30s, you might be running 10-minute miles and at the same body effort and exertion levels and things like that. So, I mean, it's almost like you'd have to go out if you did want to do intervals, and your normal interval pace is 7-minute pace, and then it's almost like you'd have to just shift that to 8:30s.
Mm.
You know, and your slow pace up from
Mm-hmm.
whatever 10 to 11:30 or something.
Yep.
You know, if you want to run, it's almost like reverse intervals, which is kind of a weird concept. But I wonder if that would even work. Would that be beneficial? Does that make
To to start off that just that much slower? Is that what you're trying
in
to
order,
say?
in other words, just slide your sort of
Oh, 100%.
pace?
Like
Yeah, like if you could do it,
100%.
like how many people in the world could actually do that?
I mean, well, you mean
I
that's
mean,
one of the things about like looking at these charts and one of the there was I'm going to go through two things, but like the if you're listening to your body, right? And you're understanding and you because that's another one of the main reasons that I just drive this home, and I'm sure it's probably annoying to some people, and that's fine. That you need to understand your body because if you're not understanding your body, you don't understand its own warning signs, then what's going to happen is you're going to get the full wrath of what those are warning you from when they happen instead of listening to your body and slowing down the way that it should. And one of the interesting things about like this time of year and the heat is that was reading this study, I think it was a few weeks ago, about cyclists, and they basically put them in a lab, and the lab was at 95 degrees, which is like like not very comfortable, and
sounds like our
obviously,
lab.
yeah, exactly, yeah, that's just true, yeah, but ours is outside, and so when they did the 95 degrees, they were slower, obviously, when they did the same time trial, because they did time trial, I think it was, and it was, so they did 95-degree lab and then a time trial in 59-degree heat or 59-degree temp. So you think, okay, obviously this is a no-brainer. Why did they even do this in terms of, how do they perform? But the kicker was they didn't overheat and then slow down. They started off slower from the very beginning when the temp was 95 versus when it was 59, as in it was your body's kind of subtle way of saying, I know what's going to happen today and I know what this feels like. I need to be proactive in conserving energy based on just how bad today is going to be. And so if you override that, not thought that your body has, but if you override that internal self-preservation mode, then what's going to happen is if you just trying to shut it off and just continue to go for it and not listen to your body and listen, oh well, I'm going to feel better, I've got to hit this pace today, then you're going to get to that point much quicker of overheating and overexerting and basically crashing and burning before the end of the race or before the end of the workout, and you're not going to be going to finish. And that's like going back to your pacing thing, that's like one of the more fascinating things to watch is and one of these in like events and races with heat is that, and I generally race well in heat. I don't race well in heat, I don't think, because my body is super accustomed to it. Like I'm not this guy that's like, oh, I can just race well in heat. The main reason I feel like I race well in heat is because I'm very good at listening to my body and I can keep my ego in check when I race. And I can understand that, all right, well, although I should be running, this pace, I might as well start. Because think about it this way, for a half marathon, for a full marathon, whether it's open or whether it's at the end of a 70.3 an Ironman, if you're a person that goes out and you're starting out running 8:30s, even though you know it's super hot, the day is going to be brutal and you pick your pace because you're like, oh, well, in training, I've been doing these paces, so I should be sticking this. You stick to your 8:30s, and then after the first 5 or 6 miles, you drop to like 9s or 9:15s. And then the last, let's say you're doing Ironman, the last loop, the last, 13, 14 miles of course, you drop to like 11.5-minute miles, 12-minute miles, and then probably have to walk some because you didn't listen to your body. You got to that point to where your core temp rose so much, you would overexert yourself so much that your body finally said, I don't care what you're telling me to do. This is what I have to do in order to survive, in order to not be in that danger zone. Versus the person who comes out of transition and says, all right, I'm going to start cruising at like very, very easy effort. Like, so instead of the 8:30s, the triathlete A was doing, triathlete B is going to start out at 9:30s, a minute slower. The first one's already gained a minute on them out of the first aid station. The plan, the type triathlete B that's doing the 9:30s walks the first aid station, cools themselves. They're still keeping their core temp lower. Well, if you're tracking them, you're tracking their core temp and how easy they are going to get to where they're going to overexert and they're going to start walking, well, by the half marathon point, they're probably even. And then the person who started at 9:30s and staved off and fought off that core temp rise for as long as they possibly could, to where it forces them to really, really, really slow down. Because as we always talk about, like, the marathon, and especially the full marathon, it's not about how fast you go, it's about how little you slow down. And that's the same thing goes for core temp, right? It's not how, it's not about how hot your core temp gets, it's about when it gets there. Is it going to be mile 3, or is it going to be mile 25? And those are huge things that dictate your performance on race day, because that's going to make you, going back to, the speed reference, who slows down the least. Because heat and overexerting yourself in core temp is going to make people walk and be done. So if you can rein yourself in and you can't understand that this is about self-preservation, this is about the whole run itself, and delaying core temp for as long as I possibly can, which should start before you even get in the water. It shouldn't start on the run. It should start long before that. Then you will find yourself in much better shape. However, as we all know, because we've watched, I mean, I think every year, and this probably isn't, like, great, but every year when I go watch Ironman Chattanooga, because it's always blazing hot, you stand there in transition and you see guys flying out of T1. I'm like, yep, I'll see you walking here in about 10, I don't know, 10 miles. And
Mm.
yep, you see the same, it happens every time they go like a bat out of hell. Like, you've got to cool your body. You just have to.
Yeah. I know, man. It's like I think about that all the time, and whenever we start talking about this, I always go back to Louisville, obviously, that when it was hot back in those days, and remember that experience. And I think that might have been where I at least tried to ground in my head this idea of starting slow and letting things warm up. Because if you think about anything, really, like you talk about engines all the time, or you can talk about frying pans or whatever you want, but if you like crank those things up to 10 right out of the gate, and then they start blowing a gasket or the cap, you know what I mean? It's almost impossible to get that car temperature, the engine temperature back down. But if you go into it slow and control it, you can kind of like hope, like try and time it towards the end when it's going to really overheat. But once that was the thing about running at that hot race that we did, is that I just remember getting to mile 2 or something like that, and knowing that I was done. I could not. I spent the entire race trying to get my core temperature back down. But if you do it in a way where like you're saying, you come out slower and control it, and let it just sort of bubble up and bubble up and bubble up. It's like you have better control over it. Literally, if you overheat, you're done.
Hmm.
And it's like it's just so amazing that that can happen so quickly, especially you know we talk about in race off the bike, because that's the biggest example that we have, is that you may feel kind of cooler on the bike, but you're really up there. If you're after doing a hot ride for 112 miles, your body temperature is probably a lot hotter than you think, because you've been riding in the wind and all this other crap. And then you come out and you're like, I feel pretty good. My run legs are there, and you start hopping out of the transition, and it just happens so quick. But like in training, the same thing. I was out riding the other day, and it's just an amazing difference if you're like on the greenway here, underneath trees, and then the minute you get into the sun, what a different feeling that is. It's almost like your effort level has to go up just to even sustain, and it's so hard to hold back.
The I think one of the, I mean, not just the holding back part, which I think is tricky. I think one of the most important parts is for, like, the athletes have to truly understand how heat affects them personally, and then why. So, everybody is affected by heat differently. Like, yes, are hotter conditions hot for everyone? Yes, but they don't affect everyone the same. So if you look back, like, through all the years, I'll use Ironman World Championships just because it's the best athletes on the planet, but it's also the Kona is usually very, very, very hot. It's very, very, very humid. And I think they've gone back. I don't know what the weight is, but they've gone back and looked at, like, there have been, I think, there was one athlete, I think it was a cyclist, but then Chris McCormick was one of the very first athletes to ever like win Kona with a certain body type or certain amount of body mass and weight, because that is one of the like one of the things people I also I think you probably understand it you because you probably see it, but generally like very slight, very small athletes that are very light are going to do well in the heat. A, because they're generating less heat, and then they have more skin, they have more surface area to release it. So petite or smaller runners or generally do better. But the rub here is that obviously fat insulates heat, which makes it harder for people who have extra fat to dissipate that heat, which means they're going to overheat quicker. But the same goes for athletes who have so much extra muscle, because muscle generates heat. And so like it's not a one or the other. It's not obviously ever an apples to apples comparison, but like that's why you see in Kona the people who usually win are just very, very, very lean. And they're just lean. They can still produce the same amount of power without having as much muscle as maybe another person. Like that's why you're never going, as much as we love Starkey, he's been on our show, he's a great guy. That's why he's likely never, ever, ever going to win Kona. Ever. Not because he's not fit, not because he's not a great athlete, but because he's so muscular and such a large framed person that he generates so much more heat that it's going to be almost impossible for him to, because while fitness helps you manage heat and possibly perform better in heat, it also means you can go harder, right? Which also means your core temp can go up with it. Those things don't aren't just like, oh well, I'm fitter so I can keep my core temp down. No, because if it's like sitting a really, really incredibly hot or incredibly powerful performance engine in a garage and shutting the door. Well, it's going to heat up like insanely quick versus like a very weak engine that shut the garage door on and wait for things to get hot in there. The fitter you are, it also means the harder you can go, which also means the higher your core temp can go. So those are all things that are also very, very relative to you. But there are also ways that once you understand why you are producing so much heat or why you can't dissipate as much heat, that you can hopefully, you don't want to obviously spend a lot of time for because the summer's here for like 3 or 4 months, and then after that, you're gravy. But you don't want to like totally try to reshape your body composition for that. But you have to do things that make you a better athlete in the heat. And you know what that means? And this is what everyone hates to hear. It means running and riding in the heat. Now, obviously, do you want to continuously expose yourself to, 100% humidity, 75% dew point when it's like 90? No, you don't want to do that, because like some of the graphs will say like if it's, let's say it's like 90 degrees outside, but the humidity is like 80. Well, that's when you get like, so when you hop on like for Wonderground, it'll have um it'll have the temp, and then it'll have feels like. And everyone goes by the feels like. And what that is that's the combo of the temperature, the heat index. It's the combo of the temperature and the relative humidity. So if you're aware outside, like, sometimes we'll be out at the lab or doing a camp, or if you're at one of these races and you look down and you think, oh, well, the temperature is 90 and the humidity is going to be 80. Well, the real feel is 113. That's insane, right? That
Mm.
that's in that, you know, that's like on the upper end of like that danger zone, which is basically you don't need to do any kind of prolonged exposure or exercise outside or strenuous activity, because you're going to do so much more harm. Same can be said like for this time of year when you need to check the air quality, right? If you live in like a real, close to a city and it's hot and it's humid and you check outside and you have like the warnings, which is like, the air quality advisory is really, really low. Days like that, take it inside. Just take it inside, because it's honestly not doing you any good. It could be doing it could have actually a negative impact if you're exercising, especially strenuously or for long periods of time in those kind of conditions. But if you're trying to get acclimated, and obviously I don't recommend doing anything dangerous at all. I always kind of err on the side of caution, that's like one of the things is that, and I told an athlete this who lives in New Orleans a few days ago, and she was like, "Well, it's getting so hot here. Like, I think I'm gonna start running the treadmill." And I was like, "No, because if you start not copping out, but if you start going on the treadmill now in the 80s, then guess what? You're going to continue to get on the treadmill for the rest of the year." And for the rest of the summer. You're just going to go there because your body's going to get used to it, and the more you stay away from running and riding in the in obviously safe heat and temperatures and conditions, the harder it's going to be. And then guess what? I know everyone's hopped up on like the virtual racing and on their treadmills, but guess what? Or virtual eventing, because you're not. I don't think you're really racing, but once it comes down to like actual racing, when it comes to Lubbock, that's probably going to happen in the year. When it comes to Muncie, that I think is going to happen in July. Those are races outside in the heat. Guess who's going to do better? The person who hopped on the treadmill in perfectly air-conditioned, man cave, 5 days a week, or the person who ran outside and ran in the heat. The person who ran in the heat is going to win. They're going to crush their soul. Same can be said though if they both show up to the race and it's perfect temperatures, because that's one of the benefits of training in the heat, is that it also benefits you in ways like that was one of the things um, I had to research when I was trying to do Leadville this year before it got canceled was, I can't go to altitude, right? Because I just don't have the time to go to Colorado and make like a little mini camp from it. So I'm gonna have to figure out like what's the best thing, what's the best way I can kind of avoid suffering really, really badly. And that was running in the heat. It produces more blood, it produces more plasma. Like those are things good. That's also allows you to perform better. So there's a definite like positive part to it. You just have to do what everyone hates to do, which is continue to do it. Oh, and I'm not talking like 2 or 3 times a week. I'm talking like 5 or 6 days a week, more times than you don't. In order to do that, you also have to swallow your pride, because and I think that's like the link in the chain that makes things so difficult right now, is that like if you have to look at the total benefit of what you're trying to do and understand the end game. Because what a lot of athletes are going to do is they're going to go outside, they're going to try to run hard in the heat, and then they're going to be so shelled or so discouraged, and they're going to be so much more sore, then they're not going to be able to work out well or at all for the next few days. So they're not going to be back out for 3 or 4 days. So you might get in like 1 or 2 sessions a week. But that's not going to get you acclimated to the heat. That's just going to check your fitness within the heat that you have on that day. So you have to check yourself, scale things back a ton, understand where you are, understand that you're not in fact getting slower, that it's not in fact the reflection of your fitness. It's just how your fitness is being expressed in the horrid, sometimes really, really tough conditions, and run that much slower. And also understand that, guess what? That's okay. Because guess what? If you do that and you slow down that minute to a minute and a half and let your body reap those benefits, because I'm gonna jump to something real quick.
Okay.
And so sorry. And is that like, but if you do it that way, then you can continue to work out every single day, and because your body's gonna be able to recover because you're not adding that much stress. It's the same thing that happens to athletes when they go into these altitude camps. Like, I'm gonna go train at altitude, man, and then they go up there and they try to do the exact same workouts that they were doing, and they get demolished because they can't breathe, and they dig themselves such a hole they actually end up not being able to work out as much as they could and reap the full benefits of altitude training, because they can't work out as much because they dug themselves a hole. It's the exact same thing as training in the heat. It's no
Mm,
different.
put away the watch and run different routes. And just go by time and to keep it easy.
I mean, like, definitely keep it easy. Like, I mean, to keep it easy and understand that it's normal, right? I think that's one of the other hardest parts for people to understand, is like that it's normal. Like, you are going to struggle in the heat. Your pace will reflect a slower number in the heat. The same watts or the same miles per hour that you usually do on your same route outside are going to take much more, or the RP, your rate of perceived exertion is going to be significantly higher. But guess what? It's all about how that stress is reflected on your body.
Mm. Go
And you
slow out of
have
the
to think
gate,
of it
man.
that way. You have to. You
Dude,
have.
yesterday, just a quick example. I mean, this is just interesting because I told you I've been just going with my chrono. Yesterday, I rode my mountain bike, right? It was just a flat route, typical, along the greenway, kind of easy ride for me. And I started my watch on the way out, and I reset it when I turned around, and it was 8 miles out and 8 miles back, something like that.
Hmm.
I was 4.5 miles fast, or 4.5 minutes faster on the way back, just cruising the quote unquote felt like was my same thing. But my point was, I started out because I was tired in the beginning, so I just really, and it wasn't that hot, but it was just one of those things where I just was like, let your body get in. So I guess what I'm saying is it's amazing how if you let your body warm up to whatever condition, really, how much better that makes things in the end. I was mentioning that frying pan or whatever, but it's like when things just kind of go from cold to hot, they just feel more um, like crackly or something. They're just like the whole thing didn't have a chance to really disperse itself well within the unit or your body or whatever the case may be, and the blood circulation doesn't happen as well, and then everything kind of gets out of whack. So that's how I think about it. But like, since we're talking about this, like you, I think you were talking about yesterday, and I've always recommended that because people always say, yeah, I got out there and it was so hot, I just crumbled, whatever. I was so hot from the get-go. And it's always good. I mean, I was like, well, just pre-fuel, pre-drink. Like I always have like, just drink a glass of water like about 20 minutes before you run. That makes a huge difference, I think. Like it cools your body, it thins your blood, or whatever happens in this, biochemical world or whatever. But do you want to talk about the importance of like prepping and fueling and that, or you still want to stay where you're at?
I mean, and fueling is a tough one in terms of that it's also so very specific. Like you can't go too into too much detail, I think, on specific fueling for everyone because like I was saying and how people, dissipate and handle heat differently, that affects what they need. How much fluid loss, how much sodium, like how much things they're going to need. Like, one of the some of the biggest things though you can do is that like, and I think this is something everyone should do, and that is, that also needs to kind of further like wrap their brain around the difference in like their rate of perceived exertion and what their pace is going to show is first, before you do anything, before you realize how hot it is, fill up your water bottle, your handheld, whatever it is, fill that up, and then if you have like a small kitchen scale, weigh your water bottle, see how much it weighs, and then picture it as like a handheld weight, and think, I wonder if my pace is going to be slower and my RP is going to be higher if I just run out the door with a 1 pound weight in my hand. Yes, in fact it will. Or if you're wearing a camelback or a belt that has like the RP is going to be different for where you carry it, closer to the chest, and like things are going to be actually lower than like in the hand or something like that. But that's where you need to start, and just accept the fact that, you know what, I'm going to be slower anyway. I might as well not feel like I'm dying in the process, which is carrying enough water and fuel for you, making sure you hydrate a ton before you go. Like, not in just the hours, but sometimes in the days leading up to it. Not just like, oh, I'll have an extra, a couple glasses of water or a couple half a, like, I'll swing by the gas station and grab a half of a G2 and that ought to get me through. No, no, it's not. First of all, Gatorade products are trash, but you need to start thinking like a day or two ahead. If you're going to be spending an hour and a half to 2 hours out in very, very hard conditions for a run, or 5 to 6 hours for a ride, it's not what you do the morning before is just going to be the top off, and you're not going to be topping off anything if you haven't done anything the previous days. You're just going to be, you know, filling up the bottom. So you've just got to start paying attention to what the temperature is going to be like, how hard it's going to be. If you need to switch your runs around or your rides around to hopefully get them into a place where it's not as hard conditions, and like do those things. You just have to be very, very, very aware. Like you just have to pay attention to the weather and know what you're about to get into. Not like, oh well, Like I see this all the time. It's one of my biggest yard like pet peeves is like if I look at the forecast and I know with like without a shadow of a doubt that there's imminent rain coming for like the whole rest of the day. And you walk out in the morning, you go walk the dog, and what do you see? You know, Johnny Jr. down the street watering his lawn. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? Stop wasting water, look at the weather, and just go back inside. You're about to get some free rain, baby. Like just relax. Like but that's the kind of detail you have to use right now when you go out. You have to pull up your phone and not just look at the temperature. Oh, well, it's 70 degrees. Okay, well, if the humidity is 90 something and the dew point 70 something, that 70 is not going to feel like a PR 70. It's going to feel like a very, very uncomfortable run that's not going to reflect your usual easy pace. But it is. It's just something that you have to start paying more attention to. It's also one of those. It's one of those small. It's not a small detail, but it's something that some people treat as insignificant or not part of the bigger picture that ends up affecting, in a negative way, the big picture. Because those are just smaller things you have to take personal responsibility for. That you have to look at these things and how they're going to affect you and what I need to do. You can't just say, "Oh, I went out for my run and I didn't take any water with me because I didn't know how I thought it was going to be okay, and then I got back and it took me 10 minutes longer than I thought it was going to take me, and I didn't have any water, and I'm just suffering." Well, so the next couple of days, you're also going to suffer. The same thing can be said for when athletes, like I have an athlete who loves to just he loves to ride his bike, loves to ride his bike, and he's an excellent cyclist. But I told him the one day when he just kind of went rogue and blasted himself for 3 hours, I just told him, I said, "Hey, listen, you're just going to have to accept and understand that for every one day you go rogue and blast yourself for 3 hours on the bike, you're going to have to pay for it for the next 4 to 5 days. Your workouts are not going to be as good. You're going to be more sore. They're not going to feel good, and they're not going to get the same benefit." That's just something you have to wrap your brain around. And the same can be said because we always look at specific stresses as, large stress or insignificant stress or it shouldn't matter, but stress is stress. And so if you look at like a very untimely, unprepared, poorly executed long run or long ride in the heat to where you get way behind on nutrition and fueling, the impact that's going to have on your body is significant. And you're going to pay for it for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Maybe not just in poor workouts, but likely missed workouts. And your recovery time is going to be extended, which means you can't perform well in the next workout. That's why you always have to consider in every workout you do, you cannot just look at it as what am I doing today? It's how is today going to affect tomorrow? How is that going to affect the week? When you hop on and everybody's gung ho to start on their Monday, training peaks training, they're like, Monday, I'm gonna have a green week. I'm back at it. I'm gonna have an all green. I'm gonna start over. I'm gonna do it, and then they like try to dig themselves this massive hole on Monday, only to leave themselves shelled for Tuesday, and then trying to get back to baseline on Wednesday, and then just seeing what they have on Thursday, and then maybe kind of getting it back by the weekend instead of thinking, all right, I've got the week and I've got today. What am I going to do today that's going to execute today's workout, but also set myself up for success tomorrow? Because the fueling you do for your workout is just about to, is just as much about tomorrow's workout as it is within the one that you're doing it. And those are the small details that athletes just have to take ownership about and pay attention to, or you're not going to reap the benefits of all the hard work that you've been putting in.
Mm. Yeah, that's why people always kind of give me shit about it, but I always carry water on runs, or I always carry fuel on runs when I'm training because my thought process is even those easy zone, like 30 to 45-minute runs or whatever like that. I mean, you're exerting. I mean, you're not just like, why not get on top of it at that point? To me, that's a good time to kind of like build up the stores and hydrate and things of that nature. But like a lot of people just take them for granted. Oh, I got to run. I'm just going to go off for 45 minutes in the heat and run and not think about water because it's no big deal. I can nail that. But then afterwards they get done and they get distracted. The next thing you know, they're not even drinking after it. And that's when to me, that's when a lot of time, because you're always going to be focused, right? If you have a 4 or 5 hour ride, you're going to be thinking hard about hydrating and fueling and all that kind of stuff. But those easy workouts, quote unquote, in between, we just take for granted and we don't really think about fueling. But it's not fueling that particular run or ride. It's thinking about the weekend and things like that. Because if you're backing yourself into a hole on Wednesday and Thursday, then imagine what those big workouts on the weekends are going to do to you. It's just going to start a bad, like, you're just going to always kind of be lingering below optimal levels, and it's just going to be building and building, and it's just going to slowly wear you down over the course of training or blocks or the summer or whatever it may be. And I think it's easier to stay in front of that. Well, it's not mentally, it's not easy to stay in front of it, but physically, it makes more sense to stay on top and in front of that than to be digging out of a hole all the time.
That is like one of the more common places for athletes to be in, is that they're just digging holes, digging
Especially in this
holes,
sport,
digging
man.
holes, digging holes, overtraining, chasing a pace, doing this, working out when they shouldn't. It's just it's a constant, and they do it all the time.
I know I'd argue that most people in daily life don't stay ahead of hydration, even if
Oh
they don't
no,
work
I
out.
agree. I agree with that totally.
So, I mean, you add all the stuff we're doing to that and think about what kind of a, long-term problem that can cause too. That's the
Hmm.
other thing, right? It's not just about this week or whatever, but if you're constantly dehydrated, and I do think that probably most triathletes are on some level chronically dehydrated. So, like, think about that, what happens over the long term, and that you start hitting those incredible fatigue, and I'm speaking from experience, and that's why I'm so passionate about trying to stay hydrated and fueled and stuff, is that I know that feeling, man. It kind of starts adding up and catching up with you over the years.
You are, man. I don't know anybody more passionate about water than you. Telling you, man. I don't know.
Oh
We
man.
could probably you could probably get a Brita sponsorship. I don't know anybody who's as passionate about staying hydrated and the effects of dehydration than you. It's a passion, man.
It really
So
is. It's because I read that book when I was younger.
when you were younger, wasn't that
Yeah.
like 4 days, like 4 years ago or something?
No, man, I've had that. It's like got yellow pages now. This book. It's old. It's like
Start
it's
pumping
called
hydro, Mike.
You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty. Um,
You're
so,
not sick. You're thirsty. I like
yeah,
it.
so that really impacted my life on some level, I think.
Yeah, I can tell.
So do you quickly want to give a little? I know you got to get going, so I don't want to go into it if you don't want to. But like, I thought a really good question from yesterday was that proper run recovery, like to, um, yeah, fluids, electrolytes, more carbs after you
Yes,
work out.
carbs, yes, fluid. I mean, all of it. Like one of the, I'll leave you with this, and this is, I think, one of the best things you can do. You can do. It's very easy because, as I was saying yesterday in like our Zoom call, is that like you know, this depending on what your life is like, you may be able to get your run done and come back and be very focused on what you need for recovery and take that extra time. And you don't have other things pulling at you. You walk in that, like I'll use you for example. You might walk back in for a run and you might have Maddie looking at you, but other than that, it's like, hey, I can focus on my recovery. I got to do what I need to do. You might have to do other things at work, but for other people who have, that have all their kids at home, or they come back in, they got work to do, or they're at the office and they got to go out for a quick lunch run, grab a shirt on the back of the desk. The next thing you know, they got a meeting and somebody called, and 3.5 hours later, they look down and they think, oh my God, I haven't eaten anything or drank anything since my run, negatively affecting you right there. So one of
Oh
the
man,
things,
yeah.
yeah, it's a huge, and it's very frequent because that's people who are really committed, like and trying to use good time management. That's what they have to do. They have to find ways to sneak things in, but that also means that their attention can be pulled in a different direction. That's not okay. I need to focus on my recovery. So and I shared this yesterday, but one of the things that I do is I will, before I go out on a run or anything that's going to be difficult, where I know I'm going to need to have something immediately when I get back, is for most of you, if you drink like, any kind of a sports drink at all, or, you know, purchase like a specific recovery drink, I'll make it before I go and put it in the fridge. That way, as soon as I walk in the house, the first thing I do is go grab it because now it's in my hand. So no matter what I do, at least I've got it in my hand as kind of like a reminder. and I'll walk straight upstairs. I'll start drinking it, and then I'll even take the bottle with me in the shower. And I'll shower. I'll make sure I'm drinking it, and then I try to finish it before I get my clothes back on to head to go back downstairs, do something with Hayden, hop back on the computer. That way, at least if something happens, if somebody calls, if my attention gets pulled a different direction, or I just kind of get sidetracked, an hour and a half, 2 hours doesn't go by and think, oh crap, like I didn't do anything. You know, because you think, oh, I drank during my run, but if you if you like wake up in the morning, okay, and you haven't drank anything, like you went to bed last night at 9 o'clock, you last time you drank them was probably 8 a.m. Okay, you go to bed, you sleep all night, you don't drink anything, you wake up, you may have a cup of coffee, you may have some tea, you may have a thing of water, then you go run and lose more water and wait for via sweat. You're at a huge negative and a huge net loss of fluid. And then you're going to go, what, 2 to 3 hours, an hour and a half, even after your run or ride, and not replenish that? You were just digging yourself a huge, huge hole. And so you've really got to focus on making sure that you set yourself up for success in those ways so that you can continue to be better at recovering. Like, and that's what a lot of it is. It's just getting better and focusing and getting better at recovery. Most athletes are not overtrained; they're under-recovered.
Makes sense. I mean, just normally sleeping, you're dehydrating yourself. I mean, just breathing. That's what that does. You're breathing. You're drying things out, and I mean, it's all a big cycle. It's all a big connected unit of things that you need to think about. But just sleeping, yeah, it's like 12 hours or 10 hours of no hydrating right there. I mean, you have to think about that. Good stuff, man.
Yeah, same to you. Go water. Woohoo!
Water's number one, man. Water's number one.
Yeah.
That's my new t-shirt.
That's your new t-shirt. Oh man, water is number one. Here it comes down the pipeline, guys. $9.99 shipping, $48. But no, we appreciate. Hey, yeah, take care of yourself in this heat. I hope you appreciated. Well, appreciate it's probably a little bit too drastic. Hope you got a lot out of the podcast we did today. Take care of yourself. Make sure you're doing what you need to do to manage the heat in a healthy and responsible way. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't been, hop over to our website, C26Triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. It is also the home of our ever-growing online hub, which is I would say, a video resource.
It's mainly.
I mean, I'll let you talk about that because it's way over my head.
It's way over your head. No, I mean, we're creating like, for example, in the hub yesterday, I took your Zoom call and I broke it up into 4 sections. It was kind of a lot of this stuff, but it's a little more detailed and focused. And you talk about, just different things on different levels. And we're just trying to create a great, deep resource for triathletes, a community that's off of, social media and things of that nature. And who knows what's going to happen, especially when we get the hub going in Chattanooga and all kinds of stuff. And that's our plan, is to really just start adding tons and tons of video that's all based on the C26 philosophy and stuff that you can trust and believe in and get better as athletes, people, whatever you want to call it. So we've got the hub going. It's sort of a private area in our website at C26Triathlon.com. There's a preview page, and right now you can pay up to from $9 to $29 to $49 and be a part of that community and support the podcast while you're at it. So we appreciate everybody that's coming in, and that's about it.
That is it, man. We will see you back again on June 1st on Monday.
All right, buddy. We'll have a good little few days here.
I will, man.
Relax.
And oh well, yeah. Relax is a relative term, but I will do my best. All right, dude.
All right, man.
See you, man.